has the same responsibility for the U.S. Virgin Islands. The United States bought the Virgin Islands, about 40 miles off of Puerto Rico. The United States bought the U.S. Virgin Islands from Denmark in 1917. We paid $25 million for the Virgin Islands. Talk about a bargain. The U.S. Virgin Islands are part of a big chunk of islands they call the Virgin Islands Group. Some of them belong to the UK, British Virgin Islands, but the ones that belong to us are these three big guys, St. Croix, St. John, and St. Thomas, plus another 50 little small ones, most of which are too tiny to show up on a map. Altogether, if you amassed all the land mass of all the U.S. Virgin Islands, you'd get a land area about twice the size of Washington, D.C. The U.S. Virgin Islands are known primarily for being absolutely gorgeous. They're known for their white, pristine beaches, their old world castles and architecture, their incredible culture, their incredible art and museums, incredible food, really rich, storied culture. And right now, the U.S. Virgin Islands are really, really hurting. Two of those three big islands, St. John and St. Thomas, just got completely walloped by this hurricane. St. Thomas has one hospital, and that hospital has been destroyed. One resident in St. Thomas told NPR today that the hospital suffered a catastrophic failure during the storm. Patients from that hospital in St. Thomas had to be evacuated to hospitals in Puerto Rico and also to St. Croix. Large parts of the U.S. Virgin Islands have no running water, no power, no cell service. I mean, the lack of water alone can be a serious humanitarian crisis when it goes on for more than a couple of days. But, I mean, you can just get a sense for seeing these telephone poles knocked down all over the side of the road because the communications were knocked out. I mean, no phone, no cell service, no power, no water. Because of all of that, it's been very hard to get information out. It's been hard to know which parts of the islands have been hit the worst. We're actually hearing that St. Croix has been largely spared. Part of the blessing of that is that St. Croix has been able to be turned into sort of staging area for people to evacuate to, for people to seek shelter. As reports started to trickle out of St. John, though, in particular, it started to become clear that things were just as bad as they were in St. Thomas, if not worse. This is one hotel in St. John before Hurricane Irma. This is that same hotel now. Gives you kind of a sense of the damage that they're dealing with. People have been posting these survivor lists, adding their names, hoping their family and their loved ones will see it, and people have a way to know that their loved ones are still alive. At least 4 people have already died in this crisis in the Virgin Islands. That number could likely rise before this is all over. Officials are telling residents it could be months before power is restored, and that St. John and St. Thomas really are not safe at this point. Now that this hurricane has devastated big parts of the U.S. Virgin Islands, it is America's problem now. It's up to us as a country to fix it, right? The U.S. in front of the U.S. Virgin Islands is not there by mistake. The U.S. Virgin Islands doesn't have its own president. The people who live there are U.S. citizens. They're subject to U.S. law. They are part of the United States, just like any other state or territory that makes up this country. Which means even though we have been slow to get reports out of the U.S. Virgin Islands, now that we are getting them, we are recognizing what we need to do. This is our American humanitarian crisis in St. John and St. Thomas, right? Our American citizens who are without food and water and power and shelter tonight. Governor of the U.S. Virgin Islands is Kenneth Mapp. He told his citizens this weekend to brace for a long road to recovery ahead, to manage their expectations. He told them, quote, "This is a horrific disaster. There will be no restorations or solutions in days or in weeks." Joining us now is Kenneth Mapp. He's the governor of the U.S. Virgin Islands. Governor Mapp, really thank you for joining us tonight. I know it's been a very challenging time for you and for everybody in the islands.
And thank you, Rachel, for giving that wonderful description of the beautiful Virgin Islands and the wonderful people of the Virgin Islands. I really was heartened to hear that, and I'm happy to report to you that mobilization of federal supplies and support has been great. We've given out close to 100,000 liters of water and concomitantly 100,000 MREs to citizens in St. Thomas and St. John. I personally visited St. John yesterday with Regional Administrator of FEMA and visited the shelters and walked into the cities and the town of Cruz Bay. I was really happy to see some restaurants had opened and were just cooking and serving the meals free and allowing people to just sit inside or eat outside. The school where the shelter was, the school lunch workers showed up Cat 5 event. In the last 3 days, we have still retained only 4 deaths thus far. The U.S. Marines' urban and search and rescue team has also been deployed, and they've been going through the neighborhoods and in the debris and making sure that there are not folks that are trapped. One interesting element for us is we've not seen showing up in the emergency rooms or the hospitals are people with traumas, broken limbs, cuts, head trauma, or anything like that. We really haven't seen much of that, so that means that folks really were able to batten down even while their homes or being